to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where you can keep informed of the latest business and tech trends by listening to stories of other people in your field and how they are overcoming challenges with emerging technologies. Join me in learning from the guests actionable tips and lessons learned to obtain greater clarity on how you or your business can leverage technology. I have an incredibly cool guest to introduce you all to today. Her name is Antonia Forster, and she is an award-winning VR and AR developer, TEDx speaker and advocate for women, LGBTQ plus people, and marginalised voices in tech. And Antonia is also a self-taught coder with expertise in emerging and immersive technology and is a senior XR technical specialist at Unity, not to mention the founder of DiVRse Technologies Ltd too, which is an innovation studio using virtual worlds to change the real world for the better. But today I want to try and define exactly what the Metaverse is, what extended reality is, how Unity is leveraging technology and digital tools to bring these parallel worlds to life in immersive experiences. And of course, what does that mean for businesses? So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you are in the world right now, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Bristol here in the UK, where you can join me and Antonia in conversation. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Antonia Forster. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the senior XR technical specialist at Unity. So XR means extended realities or mixed reality. And it basically is a big umbrella term that covers the space between virtual reality, where you're completely immersed in a virtual world, and augmented reality, where you can see the real world with digital content augmented on top. So I work with both of those types of technology, as well as the space in between, where you maybe have options to kind of go through different levels of immersion during an experience. So I work with all kinds of immersive emerging technologies. I create demos, I do public speaking, help people understand the technology and get on board with Unity's tools.
Fantastic. And it's such an exciting space to be in at the moment. But what I'd love to do is take you back in time for a moment, before the days of virtual reality, extended reality, etc. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or the moment that would go on to put you on the path you're on today? Or should I say, what's your origin story?
Great question. So I come from quite a non-traditional tech background. My original training is actually in biology, zoology, and animal behavior. So I did a degree in that. I used to work in animal behavior research, and then I went on to science communication. I worked in zoos and science centers. The person who says, "These are the penguins," that was my job for a while. It was really fun. So that was great. And so I started doing a lot of public speaking. I performed at schools and science festivals and different events, museums. And then I was invited to give a TEDx Bristol talk. Now, TED Talks, for anyone who doesn't know, are inspirational educational talks. I'm sure many listeners will be familiar with them and fans of them. I'm a big fan of TED Talks myself. And TEDx Bristol is enormous. It's one of the biggest TEDx events in the world. It's one of the biggest in Europe. It has a live audience of 2,000 people. So I was invited to give a talk, and my talk was on the way that people say that LGBTQ plus is, quote, not natural, and how that doesn't make sense because, first of all, natural doesn't mean good and unnatural doesn't mean bad. But also we do see queer behavior in nature all the time. And so as an LGBT person myself and a biologist, I felt well situated to explain that to people. So I wrote this talk, but as part of that, I felt it was important to be clear about who I was. So I had to come out to my family. That unfortunately went very badly. I had to actually cut contact with most of my family as a result of the fallout around that. And that had a lot of negative consequences emotionally, but also financially. And so I was really struggling to support myself. Unfortunately, working in zoos and science centers really isn't very financially sustainable independently. So I thought about my career options, and looking at the things I was enjoying doing, I was actually working in a planetarium at the time, and I was creating planetarium shows. And I'd become more and more interested in how to develop custom content. And so I started Googling for software that would allow me to build kind of anything I could imagine. And I stumbled across this software called Unity, which was this real-time 3D engine that allowed you to build anything really that you could imagine. So I'd already been dabbling a little bit with learning this software, but I couldn't really code very much at the time. So given my personal circumstances and my situation, I decided that I would throw myself wholeheartedly into this and learn to be a Unity software developer. So I used online resources. I didn't have much money, so I just used YouTube. And I think I bought one course on Udemy. There's also Unity Learn, which is a great resource, which is free. So I started teaching myself C# and Unity. And after about 6 months, I became a professional software developer. I got my first developer role at a company called Ultraleap, previously known as Leap Motion. It's actually two companies, Leap Motion and Ultra Haptics, that merged to form Ultraleap. So they specialize in hand tracking. And I started creating demos using hand tracking, some of them VR, some of them with a traditional monitor. And then after about a year and a half there, I got really into more developing with Unity and more complex demos. And then I got a call from Unity. And after 6 interviews and a long process, I ended up in a role as a senior XR technical specialist, which I've been in for about 2 years.
Wow, that is an inspirational story. And it's so important to hear that full journey that you've been on there. And I suspect we will have people listening all over the world that want to go into development, but convince themselves they haven't got the money, the correct aptitude for it, or whatever things that are holding them back. What would you say to that person? Because you've kind of proven that you can go out there and you can learn without spending lots of money and land that job of your dreams. Yes, you've had to put the time and effort in, but what would you say to that person listening?
I'd say the hardest thing about learning to code, if you don't have previous experience, is the emotional journey, which no one really talks about. So I had really bad imposter syndrome. I think a lot of people in software development struggle with this, especially in emerging technologies like VR and AR, because it's so new and it's changing all the time that when you learn something, it's very possible that you'll follow a tutorial online and it won't work because it's 6 months old and things have just changed since then. So I would say be as resilient as possible. And if you keep failing and you keep struggling, it's really not a reflection on you. It is a challenging space, but I think that's also why it's really exciting. It's almost a level playing field because you could have been doing it for 10 years, but any of your knowledge that's more than a year old probably isn't as relevant anymore. You probably need to keep updating it. So in a way, it's a very equal space. And I find that really exciting with VR and AR in particular. So persevere, keep going. Don't take it personally. If you can't do it at first, that's really normal. And all of us just Google things all the time. I used to Twitch stream myself coding and people were really shocked that I just Google stuff all the time. I don't really commit very much to memory. That's what we all do. That's very normal.
Love that. And of course, it was that path that would lead you to Unity Technologies. But for people that are listening and hearing about it for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind the company and the kind of problems that you set out to solve with technology there?
Absolutely, yeah. So Unity is a real-time 3D engine, and it's the world's leading platform for creating and operating any kind of interactive content. So although the company originated in gaming, it's now used in a really wide range of fields, from game developers and software developers to artists, architecture, automotive designers, filmmakers, and loads more. So anyone that wants to build and operate a rich, immersive experience often uses Unity. And gaming is still a huge part of what we do. So at the end of 2020, games made with Unity actually accounted for 71% of the top 1,000 mobile games. And some of those games, not just on mobile, include King's Crash Bandicoot franchise, which many people will be familiar with, Among Us by Inner Sloth, which is really popular, and Cube Surfer and Scribble Rider. But real-time 3D goes way beyond games, as I mentioned. So in the first quarter of 2021, Unity saw lots of new customers in things like household appliances and automotive design, healthcare, aerospace, retail. So real-time 3D really extends into almost every field, anything that you want to be reactive, interactive, rather than pre-rendered content.
And it's so refreshing to hear you say all that, because I think there is so much hype around VR and AR and the Metaverse right now. And some people, especially in the business world, might just dismiss it of, it's just for games. That's all that is. But of course it isn't. So can you set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about the current state of the extended reality space?
Absolutely, yeah. So to be clear, Unity is used for a lot of things that aren't VR and AR as well. Yeah. But my specialty is using Unity to create VR and AR content. And as you said, yeah, the metaverse is a big buzzword right now. Yeah. So Unity's viewpoint and my personal viewpoint are in alignment here, which is that that there are too many definitions out there of what the metaverse means. Like, are we in a metaverse now? Does it exist? It really depends on the definition. And I don't really want to argue semantics. It kind of doesn't matter. Whichever definition you subscribe to, we are in the metaverse, and it's essentially the next evolution of the internet. It's the blurring of lines between purely digital and physical, which is why VR and AR are used a lot as examples. It only exists because of technology like real-time 3D, that ability to create, build, influence, and manipulate things that you can transfer between the physical and digital world and back again. You can only do it in real time in an interactive way. You can't have that all static and pre-rendered. It has to be interactive. And it also means that anyone can create things. So I think the metaverse is really exciting because it's this kind of golden age for creators. Different kinds of creators, whether they're artists or developers, they can build things, they can retain ownership, and they can get paid for their work because they can create, share, and own their content in a way that works for them. Whereas historically, the roles of creator and consumer were more clearly defined and separate. So when I was growing up, it was very clear that I was a consumer and that people who are producing content are creators. But nowadays, whether you're an influencer on Instagram or you're an artist or you're a Roblox creator, everyone can create. And that's really a golden age for the creator economy. So the metaverse is a big part of that. And I find that very, very exciting.
Yeah, me too. It is an incredibly exciting space there right now. And I think for some years now, we've seen the blurring of those lines between offline and online. And I think just about every single tech company you can think of out there are currently rumored to be working on an AR set. So, but by using technology such as AR, can you tell me more about how Unity is leveraging tech and digital tools to ultimately bring these parallel worlds to life in immersive experiences? Because that seems to be where the magic's happening, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one thing I really enjoy working at Unity is I don't have to work just with one piece of hardware. Unity is multi-platform. So you can develop an experience using Unity and you can deploy that to a PC or a Mac or a VR headset or on mobile AR or an AR headset. And so that's really exciting rather than being just forced into one single ecosystem. And Unity in particular is one of the market leaders in VR and AR. It powers over 60% of the world's virtual experiences, which includes the Quest, Magic Leap, and lots of different AR Core and AR Kit enabled devices. So Unity has this huge opportunity to build spatial interfaces moving forward, which is why I'm really happy to be here. And we're also kind of distributing those tools around the world, making sure everyone has the tools and technology to create and operate different solutions. So as I mentioned, people build things like HMI for home appliances, or designing the next generation of office buildings, to using computer vision and simulation to program self-driving cars, to video games that are enjoyed by millions of different people. So it's a truly accessible platform, and developers can get started immediately for free building AR and VR experiences. So they can immediately use this real-time software to consume data, to process it, and to build interactive experiences and bring them to life.
And you've already given plenty of fantastic examples there. But for the business leaders and decision makers listening, what would you say this means for their business? And are you getting more inquiries from big companies that are eager to enter this space and not get left behind?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I get this a lot of questions, especially in the last 2 years or so. Even the last year or 6 months, it's really increasing at an exponential rate. So you may have heard the term digital twins, or some of the listeners may have heard the term digital twins. And that's the idea of taking real world data and real world objects into this interactive and immersive digital experience in real time. So Unity is a really fantastic way to do that. We have a number of tools that allow that. A digital twin is basically a virtual version of a physical place or object, or a system, or a process, or a facility. And it can imitate the state and the behavior of the real world counterpart. So that's incredibly useful for business leaders and decision makers, because it helps you understand the past, you can observe the present, and you can predict the future. So things like finding the optimal layout for a factory. You can do that using a digital twin of your factory and simulating lots of different layouts and finding the predictions of which would be most profitable, which would be most optimal, least wasteful, which would save money, save energy, be safest, for example. So it opens up loads of different possibilities for engineers. It can help people to build facilities, to sell as well, to make demos, to kind of show their own clients, and to eventually operate and maintain these complex creations. So it's a very unrivaled technology in terms of what it allows you to do. It saves you having to create physical prototypes. For example, you could use VR to prototype cars or any kind of product, and put it in a virtual showroom and virtually test it out. And that really reduces your need for physical prototypes and physical materials, because you can visualize those designs. So that reduces your environmental impact, your cost, and you can also increase your stakeholder engagement. So really a world of possibilities.
It really is. As an ex-IT guy, it's also a huge expansion on the world of test environments. It's taking it to a whole new level, isn't it?
Absolutely. And architects really love it for that reason. Imagine, well, I'm actually renovating my house right now, and I'm using VR to visualize the different layouts so that I can kind of get a feel for what it's like to be inside them before I actually knock down any walls. So personally, I can attest to it being very useful, but it's also used in architecture for that reason. And construction as well. One of the use cases that I personally have experienced as part of my work was going to a physical construction site and using an AR headset, actually a HoloLens, to see the model, the building information modeling model. BIM data is often used by architects. It's a very complex data set with lots of metadata. So you can take this BIM model straight into AR on a headset, go to a construction site and see the model of the building overlaid in real time where the site, where it would be in real life, and compare that to the construction as is. So if a pipe has been built a foot to the left, for example, you can spot that immediately in a way that would be almost impossible just relying on paperwork and maps. And you can immediately rectify that and reduce the need for rebuilding and rework. So it's been really incredible to see all the different use cases.
Wow, that's incredibly cool. I'm curious, are you documenting that journey of redoing your flat there or your house? Or
No, not really.
No,
so I have so many side projects. So actually, that one I'm kind of doing. Just on that one, I'm not particularly documenting. Maybe I should, though. Maybe people will be interested. Another thing I've done is when we've knocked through walls, I'm taking photogrammetry scans of what's inside the walls, so the wires, the pipes and such. And then you can use AR to overlay that on the wall so that later I can make sure when I'm putting a nail in the wall, I'm not going to go into a wire or into a pipe, for example.
Wow. And another one of the big reasons I was quite excited to talk to you today was after reading about your work with DiVRse Technologies and creating virtual worlds that actually change the real world for better. I think we all need a bit of that right now. So can you expand on some of your work there?
Absolutely, yeah. So the debut work of DiVRse Technologies is an experience called the LGBTQ plus Virtual Reality Museum. So to create that, essentially, I approached LGBTQ plus people, just everyday people in the community, and asked them, if you were to choose an object from your life to represent you in a museum, what would you choose and why? And people chose a variety of objects, from a pair of wedding shoes to nail polish to an African headdress to a teddy bear. Then I scanned the object using photogrammetry, which is a really interesting process. You don't need any special equipment. You just take lots of photos of the object from every possible angle, and then you use software to stitch them together into a 3D virtual model. And then along with my co-developer, Thomas Terkildsen, who is a queer Danish developer that I met through Twitter doing this project, we built this virtual museum to showcase these objects, along with the voice of the owner of the object explaining its personal significance to them and its story. We also covered the walls in artwork by queer creators all over the world, and we created this experience. So you can go into this virtual space, you can handle these objects, hear these stories, and explore freely. And it's a really beautiful space. The centerpiece is a marble statue by the artist Patricia Cronin, who created the world's first and only LGBTQ plus marriage equality monument. So it's a 3-ton marble statue of her and her now wife, the artist Deborah Cass, and they're lying on kind of a mattress with their in an embrace with their toes touching. And so I reached out to her, and very kindly, she allowed me to scan the statue and make it the centerpiece of this museum. So it premiered at Open City Documentary Festival in London in September last year, 2021. It then went to Queensland XR Festival, where it was a finalist for 2 awards. And then earlier this year, it went to Tribeca Film Festival, where it actually won the New Voices Award. So I'm really, really happy about that. We're now expanding, working with different enterprise clients and intergovernmental organizations to add more stories, to make it more accessible, and to create lots of different bespoke custom content. So that's been an incredible journey and really fun and rewarding.
And I can only concur with everything you've just said there. What you created is something incredibly beautiful, and I've checked it out online. Blew me away, and that was one of the big reasons I invited you on today. And where can anyone listening find that, just for anyone listening now thinking, I need to check this out?
Brilliant. Yeah. So the website is LGBTQ LGBTQVRmuseum.com. I know it's a lot of letters. So LGBTQVRmuseum.com. And then you'll find the website for that experience. Myself and my co-developer are now working. We started work on our new experience, which is all around using immersive and emerging technologies like VR, AR, biometrics, haptics to reduce prejudice against marginalized people. So that's our goal with our next project. It is a big project. We're working with a lot of different researchers who are leaders in the compassion cultivation space. We really want to find a way to apply those technologies to make a very, very tangible and important difference in the world.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add a link to the show notes so people can find that nice and easy without remembering all the letters there. But I always like to finish the show by saying technology works best when it brings people together. So with that in mind, what makes you hopeful or even excited about the future that we can build together by ultimately leveraging technology and removing those blurred lines between online and offline?
Yeah, that's I'm really excited about social spaces. So I spend a fair amount of time in virtual reality social spaces like VR chat. I actually have full body tracking and so do other users there. So I can get this sense of physical presence without actually being there. And one thing that's really interesting there is avatar embodiment. So I like to have a non-gendered avatar. I actually like to be a kind of inanimate object like a chili pepper or a stick of butter. I think that's really interesting because people don't necessarily perceive me as female immediately upon entering that space. And I find their interactions are quite different to the ones I have in real life. So I find that really interesting. There's also other worlds there where people teach sign language. The sign language itself is adapting to the technology. So certain signs like the British Sign Language for L involves putting your palm flat in front of your head. And if the camera's on your headset, that doesn't really track. So there's other signs that work better for head-mounted cameras, which I think is really incredible, seeing language evolve around the limitations of the devices. So I'm very excited about social spaces in VR, the blending of VR and AR. There's a great demo called Unity Slices, which I think is one of the most exciting demos I've ever seen. And it shows how you can go from an augmented reality experience through to kind of a completely virtual experience and back again. And so I think those lines will become increasingly blurred of what is VR, what is AR, particularly when you're using head-mounted displays and pass-through. So a VR headset with a camera on so that you can see the real world through that. I think that allows for a lot. But most of all, really, I'm just excited about getting more diverse creators into the space because I think we'll see more and more interesting and novel content when we have a big range of creators who are all different genders, ages, ethnicities, come from different educational backgrounds, social backgrounds, have different cultural experiences, because I think that leads to diverse content that we haven't seen yet that I probably can't even imagine. So very excited about just the accessibility of it increasing and the number of creators increasing and seeing what people come up with.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for spending some time with me today and sharing your story. And as a bit of a thank you in return, some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or even listened to this podcast. So if I was to say, is that a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with and why? Because he or she might just be listening to this and we'll send it out into the universe. Who would you say and why?
Very tough question. There's a lot of amazing creators in the space. I'm very lucky to have spoken with quite a few of them already, actually. So two people who come to mind immediately are Chloe Condon, who is a developer advocate at Google, and April Spate, who is a spatial computing lead at Microsoft. They've both been really incredible to follow all of their content. They've been very inspirational to me as leaders in the space. Also, Philip Rosedale, who is the founder of Second Life. I've been very fortunate to speak to him a few times, and I would love to pick his brain because he has absolutely incredible ideas and understanding of economics. Being the founder of something like Second Life, he has a really, really deep understanding of how can we create these metaverses or these virtual spaces that actually increase equity in a way that is fair and inclusive. And he has fantastic ideas on that. So those are the names I'll go with.
Beautiful. Well, I'll send those out into the ether and we'll see what will happen. All I ask is if anything does happen, come back and let me know. But
absolutely, will do.
Well, before I let you know, for anyone listening just wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, contact your team or just explore some of the work that you've done and maybe check out your TED Talk too. What's the best starting point for everything?
Brilliant. Yeah. Honestly, if you Google my name, you'll probably find most things. So it's Antonia Forster, Forster. I'm Antonia R. Forster on Twitter. I'm quite active there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do have a website that I badly need to update, but also the museum website, which we mentioned earlier. So yeah, feel free to follow me on all socials, particularly Twitter, and I'll keep everyone abreast of what I'm working on next.
Well, as I said a few moments ago, I've loved spending time with you today, and especially how we've gone past the hype stage of these technologies and looking about removing those blurred lines between online and offline and creating virtual worlds that change the real world for the better too. It's incredibly powerful what you're doing here. I'd love to stay in touch with you and follow your journey and see where it leads, but more than anything, just thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think we spoke about everything there, didn't we? From the metaverse and emerging technologies to business cases for virtual reality, augmented reality, to Antonia's incredibly valuable work there with the LGBTQ plus VR Museum, which is incredible, and I do urge you check that out. And as I said in the podcast, I'll add all those links in a blog post on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. If you just browse to podcasts, you'll find links to over 2,100 interviews. And there should be a blog post for Antonia and the work she's doing with links to everything we talked about today. But this podcast is not just about my voice and Antonia's voice. I think something we both agreed on today strongly was getting your voice heard. And I'd love to invite you to share your story with me by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Let's keep the conversation going. If you've got a few comments about today or you'd like to join me on the podcast, whatever it is, just let me know. So I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.